Good evening. The Planning Commission meeting of November 2nd, 2022 is called to order. The Planning Commission meeting is being broadcast live on Glendale TV, viewable on Spectrum Cable, Channel 8, and AT&T Uverse, and Channel 99. Meetings are also streamed live in high definition on the city's webpage, glendale.gov/live, on youtube.com/myglendale, and on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire devices using a free app called Screen Weave and choosing Glendale TV from the menu. Meetings are also archived on the city website for viewing anytime at glendale.gov/agendas. For public comments and questions during the meeting, please call 818-937-8100. City staff will be submitting the questions and comments in real time to the appropriate person. Current Planning Commission agendas are available by visiting our website at www.glendaleca.gov. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Tarachian?
Here.
Commissioner Fuentes?
Here.
Commissioner Manassian?
Here.
Commissioner Shabazian? Here. Chairperson Lee?
Here. Reports regarding posting of agenda.
Yes, the agenda for the November 2nd, 2022 regular meeting of the Glendale Planning Commission was posted on October 26, 2022 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. And approval of minutes from October 19th, 2022.
So moved.
I'll second.
Yes, we have a motion and a support. Okay, next item is oral communication. I don't see any cards from the public or communication card. So we'll move on to the next item. So board commission member comments. I just like to make just one comment, and that is the tragedy that happened in Seoul, Korea, with the young people, and it is as you know that I'm Korean American, and when I heard of such sad news, and this type of things happen even in this age, so hopefully that the systems will change and there will be a better, procedures and protocols that could prevent this type of a tragedy from happening. But I just wanted to take a moment to share this tragedy, and hopefully that everyone here can share the condolences to these young people who have deceased. Any other comments from board commissioners? Okay. Old business, don't see any. So on the new business, we're going to do a little housekeeping. We're going to switch the items with A and B. So we'll go with the item B first, 900 East Broadway, Alley Vacation, case number 187V. Mr. Kissel.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Commission. The first item before you this evening is a proposed alley vacation located at 900 through 920 East Broadway. Last year, the Glendale Housing Authority, along with two affordable housing developers, proposed and received approval for senior housing projects located at both 900 and 920 East Broadway. While they were separate projects, they were really processed concurrently, and this concurrent proposal sorry. Okay, all right, sorry. While the projects were separate, they were really processed concurrently, and they included a provision for vacating the alley, the existing alley that is currently located between the projects. And they did this with the intent of creating a pedestrian paseo between the two projects. What is before you this evening is, in fact, the alley vacation. Planning Commission's role is to make findings as to whether the proposed vacation will be consistent with the goals and the objectives of the general plan. Great, the appropriate slide is up. Here's the location map. The location map shows both the two housing projects. The Broadway is located on the top of the page. The street Broadway is located on the top of the page, just for orientation. Cedar Street is located on the left side, and Belmont Street is located on the right side of the location map. The Citrus Grove project, colored in brown on the location map, is the new build project. That's on the left-hand side of the page, or the slide. And that project will contain 126 units. The Harrower's Lab project on the right side of the location map will actually rehabilitate the historically significant buildings on that site and contain 40 units. And then sort of the checkered, long, thin item in the center of the slide, the center of the location map, is that portion of the alley to be vacated. So that's located between the two projects. Next slide. Thanks. This is the actual location map. It shows the portion of the alley to be vacated in yellow. And then there's a newly proposed alley south of the Citrus Crossings project. That is shown in blue, and that will actually connect to the remaining portion of the alley south of the vacated portion of the alley that is not going to be vacated. So the alley sort of becomes like an upside-down L. Staff believes that consistency findings to the city's general plan can be made regarding vacation of this alley. Can I do this, Kristen, or? Okay. Yes, okay, great. So staff believes that consistency findings can be made. With regard to the land use element, the alley vacation is consistent as it will enhance the site with landscaping and open space, both of which are allowed in the commercial community and commercial community services and the residential medium density land use designations. Consistency with the housing element is spelled out more completely in the staff report, but just as a little snippet, the alley vacation is consistent as it facilitates adding high-density residential development along public transportation and commercial corridors in close proximity to services, and it increases the opportunity of affordable housing or for affordable housing. The housing project will also serve a special needs group as these projects are designated for low-income seniors. It's a senior, both will be senior living facilities. The project is consistent with the circulation element as the project adds housing opportunities to a commercial corridor, Broadway, and is in close proximity to downtown Glendale. The open space and conservation element encourages a variety of outdoor recreation opportunities and the utilization and adaptive reuse of historic structures, along with other items. I'm just highlighting a couple. The vacation facilitates this as the alley will be converted to a pedestrian paseo, and the eastern project, the Harrower's Lab facility, will be, as I mentioned before, adaptively converted to 40 affordable senior units. Finally, the recreation element also encourages a variety of recreational opportunities for all residents, and further, it encourages these facilities to be responsive to particular neighborhoods. So as I delineate more, as in the recreation element, and while the area has 3 parks within sort of the boundaries of this area, because of its size and because of the population density, the existing parks really don't adequately serve residents of this area. So, as I mentioned previously, once the alley is vacated, it will be developed as a publicly accessible pedestrian paseo, and amenities such as a walking path, benches, landscaping, and some other items will be included in this area. And this passive park will be appropriate for the senior population that will be living immediately adjacent to the paseo when the projects get built. It will also be open to the surrounding neighborhood. So with that, to conclude, staff believes that the proposed alley vacation is consistent with the goals and objectives of the general plan. Thank you.
So, Commissioners, any questions for the staff? Yeah, go ahead.
I have 2 very quick questions. My first question was, for the existing portion of the alley, do we have any emergency vehicles that are going to be accessing that? Or is the access normally from Broadway and Cedar?
There are public facilities located in that alley now. There, also, I would imagine trash trucks or, fire trucks if needed to access that alley as currently configured. That's one reason why the new alley proposed in a north-south direction was proposed. That alley will connect with the remainder of the existing north-south alley that will not be vacated. So there will still be, emergency access and, other access as needed.
Thank you. One follow-up question on that. Have you had any comments from our fire department? My only concern was, I like the project, but my only concern is the turn radius, and I don't know if they have commented on it. So that would be something.
They commented it on initially when it was approved, when the projects in their entirety were approved last year. Okay. And they were fine with it. And I think that's one reason why there's a little bit of a blip in the alley there to allow for some turning radius.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have a question too. So when we vacate this thing, and you want to make it paseo to pedestrians, is that going to be 24 hours access, or will it be closed?
It will be 24 hours access, but the projects on both sides will have security, will be secured. So while both projects look into the pedestrian paseo, the larger project on the west side has open space that will directly look into the paseo. It will be gated and locked. So the private areas will not be accessible, but residents can go in and out.
So paseo will be 24 hours
Yes.
accessible.
Yeah.
So how do you plan to deal with, if we have homeless wanting to come in a nice, improved paseo area?
That will be something that I believe the developers, the affordable housing developers that will run both facilities will deal with. I mean, they will be responsible for maintaining the pedestrian paseo once it's developed. That's in part of the agreement.
Okay, so that will be part of the agreement then. What about the maintenance of paseo?
Same thing.
So
They will be responsible.
They will be responsible. Thank you. That's all I have.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry?
One of the affordable housing developers is actually in the audience. I didn't notice her initially.
You have any questions for the developer? No? Okay. That'll be it. Then we'll close the public hearing, and I'll ask for, on this subject? Did you turn in the card?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, are you Mr. Patrick? Yeah, Patrick Wade. My apologies. Yes, we do have one speaker card, so would you like to come up, sir?
Yes, I own property at 122 South Cedar. My property's been there for a long time, and this alleyway's been there for nearly 100 years. It's part of the city of Glendale. It seems to me a bit difficult to explain why the city's going to just give away this property. I hope somebody is charging somebody for the use of our public property. That's another issue. My concern, and why I'm in opposition, is this alleyway is the entrance off of Broadway and exit down on Harvard. You have to have 2 ways in and 2 ways out. Why? Because of the public safety, which you nicely talked about. I think what you have to do is get the fire department to see if they can turn their trucks and stuff around that you have enough room to make a turn for these larger vehicles, plus all rubbish is collected from the alleyway. All of the multifamily buildings there have the rubbish picked up from the alleyway by the city, and those trucks are big. They have to go, you can't back them up once you're in there. I mean, it'd be difficult. They could, but it'd be difficult. But I'm concerned that the turn is not going to be great enough, and for fire too. It's got to be big enough and wide enough if you're going to connect Cedar to the rest of the alleyway. That's got to be there, or it's dangerous. It's a dangerous public safety issue. And these people who live in these towns, that's the access to their parking is off this alleyway. So this alleyway is used a lot. And I was interested in the problem of security because in other low housing, in other cities, that has been a problem with security, with homeless, with drug use, and then you've created a problem, and you're going to put an open area out there. If the developer is going to provide you security, it better be for more than a year or 2. It better be longer lasting. And really, the security issue for these buildings and for the tenants in these buildings who are pretty much helpless individuals, I mean, they're targets, should really be something you need to look into. I wouldn't oppose it if this turn onto Cedar and as the entrance exit at Cedar is great enough. That seems to me a fairly acceptable solution. But you may create some troubles for yourself by having this. You may be a magnet for problems. But you really should get fire and the rubbish people to see that they can make it work. It has to be wide enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wade. And I think to that point, Commissioner Shibajian brought up that point, and also on your homeless, issues. So if we can direct staff to look into that further, so that we can have properly assess it for this emergency vehicle access and trash trucks. I don't see any more cars, so I apologize. I closed the public hearing, but reopened it and closed it again. So I'm ready for motion. If anyone can read into it, read the motion, please.
Planning Commission Chair Lee. Hi.
Yes.
I would like to make a small amendment to the motion in order to reference the findings that were described within the staff report and as provided in the testimony.
Yes.
So at the very end of the motion that's in your packet that ends with "of the City of Glendale," I propose adding, as described in the staff presentation and the Planning Commission staff report dated November 2nd, 2022, period.
Okay, so we'll refer to that, and that
Would be the
was
motion as amended.
amended, yes, motion is amended, okay. So who would like to tackle this?
Yeah, I could go.
Okay, go ahead.
So I think, I mean, I have no issues making the findings that this aligns with our general plan. I think the issues raised are important, and I think that's great to add to our comments to city council. So with that said, I'm willing to move.
So do you have a record? Okay, yeah, can you read the motion, please?
Do we have a second, or?
I'll second it.
Moved by Commissioner Tarachian, seconded by Commissioner Manassian, that upon consideration of vacation case number 187V, and after reviewing the records, files, reports, and all documentary evidence submitted with regard to said alley vacation, subject to compliance with State Government Code Section 65402 and Chapters 2.68 and 12.24 of the Glendale Municipal Code, the Planning Commission finds and hereby and recommends to City Council that the requested conditional vacation of a portion of the first alley easterly of Cedar Street, southerly of Broadway, Alley 502 is consistent with the goals and objectives of the comprehensive general plan of the City of Glendale as amended.
As described in the staff presentation and the Planning Commission staff report dated November 2nd, 2022.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and support. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Tarachian?
Yes.
Commissioner Fuentes?
Yes.
Commissioner Manassian?
Yes?
Commissioner Shabazian?
Yes.
Chairperson Lee.
Aye. So then now we can move on to the next item, which is the 246 North Jackson Street, density bonus case number PBB P2120753. Ms. Pruitt.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners, and members of the public. I'm Cassandra Pruitt. I'm the case planner for the project. And in this presentation, I will summarize the appeal of the density bonus project for 246 North Jackson that was approved by the planning hearing officer on July 7th. First, I will describe the project and then the planning hearing officer review, and then the appeal, and then staff's response to the appeal. The parties involved are the applicant, Farzin Mali, the owner, Artshar LLC, and the appellant, Grant Michaels, representing the Glendale Homeowners Coordinating Council. The subject site is located in Glendale's City Center neighborhood at the southeast corner of East California Avenue and North Jackson Street, and adjacent to an alley. The subject and surrounding sites are all zoned R1250, which is the zoning designation for high-density residential development, equivalent to one dwelling unit for every 1,250 square feet of lot area. This is an aerial view of the existing site. The project proposal is to demolish the existing 3-unit building and build a new 11-unit building, with 4 of the units being density bonus units. Per state density bonus law, density bonus provisions may not apply to a project with rental dwelling units that have been vacated or demolished within a 5-year period preceding the project's development application, or which have been occupied by low or very low income households, unless the project replaces those units. The existing building on the subject site has 3 one-bedroom units of approximately 570 square feet in average size. At the time the property was purchased, 2 units were vacant and 1 was owner-occupied and was not categorized as low income. Because the income levels of the 2 vacant units are unknown, the affordability calculation is based on the proportion of affordable units in the jurisdiction, which results in a replacement requirement of 1 affordable unit with 1 bedroom. This calculation and analysis is more fully described on page 5 of the staff report. The applicant is providing 1 affordable unit to very low-income households, and the unit includes 2 bedrooms and 768 square feet of floor area, which meets the replacement requirement and is larger than the unit being replaced. The proposed project includes demolishing the existing 2-story, 3-unit multifamily building, as I mentioned, and building a new 9,760 square feet, 3-story, 11-unit apartment building with 1 unit reserved for very low-income households. The existing apartment building is not identified as being historic, and there are no indigenous protected trees on or within 20 feet of the site. The project is exempt from California Environmental Quality Act review as a Class 32 infill project. And further information about that can be found in Exhibit Number 1 of the staff report. The project qualifies as a density bonus project under state law because it provides more than 5% of its units as affordable. Specifically in this case, it provides 14%, or 1 unit. Under state density bonus law, the project automatically qualifies for a 46.25% density bonus for the number of dwelling units, which allows the project to have 11 dwelling units, since the base units allowed in the R1250 zone is 7 units. The project also qualifies for reduced parking and incentives and waivers for relief from code standards, subject to required findings of fact. The site plan indicated on the slide features underground parking access along Jackson Street. With ground level building access along California Avenue. With landscaping along the street sides and additional landscaping and common open space at the rear of the building. As you can see, the building is pushed out to the street side along California Avenue, but stepped back further along the other sides. The underground parking garage features 14 vehicular parking spaces, 4 bicycle parking spaces, elevator access, and various rooms for trash and equipment. The first floor plan shows the same features as site plan, but with room layout and elevator access. The second floor plan shows a somewhat smaller building outline compared to the first floor, showing that the building steps in as it goes up in order to reduce the overall massing. The third floor plan is yet smaller than the second, with the main reduction in floor area accommodating a large rooftop common open space area with seating. The grayed out areas on the roof plan indicate where the building massing ends at the third floor. This helps illustrate how the building height changes and is not consistently at the highest point. The elevations further show the variation in building height and general massing of the building. These are the north and south elevations. And these are just to include in the record the east and west elevations. The east elevation faces the alley, and the west elevation faces Jackson Street. This bird's eye rendering shows the overall massing of the building with varying heights, facade planes, setbacks, etc., that help reduce the apparent massing of the building. This view is taken from the intersection looking southeast. This is another rendering pointing northeast from the south side of the building. The driveway entrance to the subterranean garage is located at the lower left, which faces Jackson Street, and the center rooftop area with the shade device is where the rooftop deck is located. The surrounding buildings near the project site are 1- and 2-story multifamily buildings, with the immediately adjacent buildings shown on this slide. Comments about the project were received from the city's Community Development Department, Public Works Department, Fire Department, Community Services and Parks Department, and Glendale Water and Power Department. The comments related generally to standard comments and conditions applicable to similar projects, with a few notable requirements as summarized on this slide and more fully described in Exhibit 6 of the staff report. In summary, the project is required to provide a street dedication at the corner for an accessible sidewalk ramp, 2 new street trees, and various equipment related to water and electric service and fire safety. The department comments have been incorporated into the project design as shown in the project plans in Exhibit 5 of the staff report. In terms of parking, per state density bonus law, the city shall not require parking spaces in excess of 1/2 parking space per unit, inclusive of handicapped and guest parking, if the project is located within 1/2 mile of a major transit stop and there is unobstructed access from the housing development to that stop. The applicant has demonstrated the project qualifies for this parking standard because the project is located 0.4 miles from the intersection of North Glendale Avenue and East Broadway, which is a major transit stop as described more fully on page 6 of the staff report. Therefore, under this parking provision, the project is required to provide 6 parking spaces. As mentioned on the previous slide, the project provides 14 parking spaces, which is 8 parking spaces more than what the city is allowed to require. In addition, the applicant is voluntarily providing 4 bicycle parking spaces. The density bonus review also involves considering incentives and waivers from code requirements in exchange for the provision of affordable housing. The difference between incentives and waivers is the required findings of fact. For incentives, the city must grant the request unless it can prove certain facts are true. For waivers, the city must grant the request if certain facts are shown to be true. The density bonus request includes 2 incentives. The first is to allow the project to exceed the maximum code-allowed height and number of stories, specifically allowing 37.5 feet and 3 stories, whereas code allows 26 feet and 2 stories. The second incentive request is to provide less than the code-required minimum and average setbacks, primarily for the underground parking level and street setbacks. The underground parking level is required to have a minimum 20-foot street front and 5 feet street side setback, whereas the project proposes to provide a 4 feet and 4-inch street front setback and a 4-inch street side setback. For the above-ground setbacks, the project proposes a street front setback of 20 feet on the 2nd and 3rd floors, whereas code requires a minimum of 23 feet. For the above-ground street side setbacks, the project proposes a 4-foot setback, whereas code requires 5 feet on the 1st floor, 8 feet on the 2nd floor, and 11 feet on the 3rd floor. The setback averages are similarly several feet short of the requirement. For the interior setback, only the 2nd floor on the south side doesn't meet the required 8-foot setback. Instead, it has a 5-foot setback. Per density bonus law, the department is required to grant the incentives unless it can make written findings based on substantial evidence that any one of the 3 conditions on this slide are true. For the first finding, the applicant provided information that the requested incentives for increased stories in height and reduced setbacks are required in order to allow additional buildable area to provide more units that would reduce cost to the developer of providing the affordable unit and thus make it financially feasible, as well as provide more parking on site, which improves the viability and marketability of the project. Without the incentives, the applicant would not be able to provide the additional affordable unit. For the second finding, the project doesn't appear to have a specific adverse impact upon the public health and safety or physical environment because the existing buildings to be demolished aren't identified as historic resources, the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, and the project is designed to comply with the city's various municipal code standards relating to public health and safety. Further, certain features of the project help offset the increased height and stories and reduced setbacks. Although the requested height is 37.5 feet, the predominant building height is actually 35 feet, which slightly reduces the overall massing. The reduced setbacks are mainly on the street-facing sides, which aren't adjacent to other buildings and therefore allow more space, light, and air. The building also uses a variation in massing and materials to help reduce the apparent size of the building. For the third finding, no known state or federal laws would be contrary to the granting of these incentives. Therefore, there is no substantial evidence that the findings of fact can be made, and therefore the incentives must be granted. The density bonus request also includes 2 waivers. The first is to allow the project to exceed the maximum allowed floor area ratio, proposing a floor area ratio of 1.32, which is 9,760 square feet, whereas code allows 1.2, which is 8,904 square feet. The second waiver request is to provide less than the minimum required unit size, proposing 2 units with 768 square feet instead of the code required 800 square feet, and 5 units with 574 square feet instead of the code required 600 square feet. Per density bonus law, the department shall grant the request for waivers if it can demonstrate the findings are true, as summarized on this slide. For the first finding, the applicant provided information that the requested waivers for increased floor area ratio and reduced minimum unit sizes are required to allow provision of a more balanced unit mix that will improve the project's financial plan and allow the creation of an affordable unit. Specifically, these waivers allow the project to feature 1 and 2 bedroom units instead of studio and 1 bedroom units, without which the project would not be financially viable. Therefore, without these waivers, the affordable unit would not be able to be provided. For the second and third findings, the project doesn't appear to have a specific adverse impact upon the public health and safety or physical environment or historic resources. Because as I mentioned before, the existing building to be demolished isn't identified as a historic resource. The project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, and it's designed to comply with the city's various code standards relating to health and safety. Further, the increased floor area ratio is somewhat offset in the same way as the height and stories by the fact that the building is on a corner and adjacent to an alley, which allows more space, light, and air between it and nearby buildings. And ample interior setbacks have been provided next to the adjacent building, and design features of varied massing and materials help minimize the apparent size of the building. The reduced unit sizes are minimal, varying just 4% from the required size. For the fourth finding, no known state or federal laws would be contrary to the granting of the incentives. Therefore, it appears the findings of fact can be made for the waiver requests. Now I'll summarize the planning hearing officer review of the case. On June 1st, 2022, the planning hearing officer conducted a public hearing for the application. 2 members of the public spoke in opposition to the project, including Catherine Yurka and Herbert Milano. 4 public comments in opposition to the project were received through email. However, because the findings of fact were determined to be satisfied, the hearing officer granted the density bonus request pursuant to state density bonus law. On July 21st, 2022, an appeal application was submitted by Grant Michaels. In summary, the main arguments for the appeal are 1, incorrect application of state density bonus law, 2, incorrect application of California Environmental Quality Act review, 3, relevance of Glendale Municipal Code section relating to just cause and retaliatory evictions, and miscalculation of required replacement of affordable dwelling units, and 4, reference to a pro forma was insufficient evidence. Part 4 of the appeal application includes a statement of error that outlines up to 6 bases for the appeal, as indicated on this slide. The appellant provided very brief responses to each of these prompts, with no additional documentation attached to the appeal or provided subsequently. In the following slides, I will go through each statement provided by the appellant and staff's response to each. In Part A of the basis of appeal, the appellant stated that the violation of a specific provision of law was, quote, Government Code Section 65915, provisions regarding calculation of replacement units, incentives and waivers, CEQA guidelines, Section 15332 and 15300.2, unquote. Staff's response is that the approval of the density bonus does not violate any specific provisions of law, and the project complies with the replacement unit standards, incentives and waivers, and CEQA guidelines. As summarized earlier in the presentation and described in detail in the staff report, the project is required to provide 1 affordable replacement unit, which it does, and the incentives and waivers are required by state law to be granted if the findings of fact are satisfied, which they were. As fully analyzed in Exhibit 1, the project is exempt from CEQA review as a Class 32 infill exemption, and public noticing for the project was proper per state law. In Part B of the basis of appeal, the appellant stated that the hearing officer exceeded its authority by virtue of any of the provisions of law given in item A above by, quote, granting of density bonus, concessions and waivers, despite limitations in Government Code Section 65915 above and CEQA exemption, unquote. Staff's response is that the project qualifies as a density bonus project because it provides at least 5% of the total units as affordable units. And as described in the prior slides, the incentives and waivers are required by state law to be granted if the findings of fact are satisfied, which they were. As fully analyzed in Exhibit 1, the project is exempt from CEQA review as a Class 32 infill exemption, and public noticing for the project was proper per state law. In Part C of the basis of appeal, the appellant stated that the hearing officer failed to fulfill a mandatory duty by any provision of law given in item A above, specifically, quote, CB, unquote. Staff's response is that the planning hearing officer did not fail to fulfill a mandatory duty under CEQA because, as described in the prior slides, granting of the density bonus, concessions, and waivers comply with state law, and the CEQA determination complies with the CEQA guidelines. In Part D of the basis of appeal, the appellant stated that the hearing officer refused to hear or consider certain facts before rendering its decision, specifically, quote, council direction re density bonus projects, misapplication of section 65915, relevance of GMC 9.30, unquote. Staff's response is that the planning hearing officer did not refuse to hear or consider certain facts before approving the incentives and waivers. All correspondence and public testimony was considered prior to the decision. With respect to the appellant's ground for appeal related to, quote, council direction redensity bonus projects, unquote, there is no explanation beyond this statement, and therefore staff can't speculate what this ground means and can't respond. There is no misapplication of Government Code Section 65915 because, as discussed previously, the project is required to provide one affordable replacement unit and provides one low-income unit. One very low-income unit, and therefore it meets the replacement requirement. Lastly, Glendale Municipal Code Section 9.30 refers to the Just Cause and Retaliatory Evictions Ordinance. The appellant did not clarify how this applies to the appeal or the density bonus approval. When the building was purchased, one unit was owner-occupied and the other two were vacant. Therefore, that code section does not apply. In Part E of the basis of appeal, the appellant stated that the evidence before the hearing officer was insufficient or inadequate to support its action, determination, or ruling, or any specific finding in support thereof, specifically, quote, pro forma, unquote. Staff's response is that the staff report provided detailed analysis of the requested incentives and waivers in relation to the required findings, and along with the submitted correspondence and public testimony at the hearing, the evidence before the planning hearing officer was sufficient and adequate to support their decision. The appellant's answer to this appeal finding, pro forma, seems vague and inconclusive. The staff report presented at the planning hearing officer referred to a pro forma when it stated that the incentives and waivers would result in an improved financial pro forma for the project. These statements were general in nature, referring to financial feasibility of the project, and were not based on a specific pro forma document provided by the applicant, nor was a pro forma required to be submitted with the density bonus application. As described in the staff report, per case law, the city cannot require an applicant to submit a pro forma as required evidence to support the granting of incentives under state density bonus law. Further, the decision letter did not refer to a pro forma or rely on that information as a basis for its decision. In Part F of the basis of appeal, the appellant states that they have new evidence of material facts not previously presented, which, if considered, could change the act, determination, or ruling. Specifically, quote, calculations of affordable replacement unit not included in staff report, unquote. Staff's response is that per state density bonus law, and as more fully described in the background section of the staff report on page 5, the project is required to provide one affordable replacement unit, and it provides one very low-income unit. Therefore, the development meets the replacement requirement. The replacement unit calculation was described in the planning hearing officer staff report on page 7, which is in Exhibit 7 of this staff report, and it was more fully amplified in the planning hearing officer decision letter on page 3, which is in Exhibit 8 of this staff report. In conclusion, staff finds that the appeal does not present any new substantial evidence not already analyzed and discussed by the planning hearing officer that warrants changing the staff CEQA determination for the project, and that the planning hearing officer fulfilled their duty in accordance with state density bonus law and the CEQA guidelines. Therefore, based on the analysis in the staff report, the evidence in the record, and the reasoning set forth in the approval of the subject density bonus review case, staff recommends that the Planning Commission sustain the planning hearing officer's decision to grant with conditions the requested incentives, concessions, and waivers for the project and sustain staff's CEQA determination. As a note, 15 public comment emails were received and shared with the commission prior to the hearing. One was in opposition and the others were in support. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pruitt. Any questions for the staff? Okay, so then I'd like to bring up the appellant, Ms. Catherine, is it Urce or Urce? You have 15 minutes.
Thank you. It's Yurka.
Oh, Yuka, okay. My apologies.
Okay, thank you.
Please state your name and address.
Oh, my name is Catherine Yurka, 1845 Neodrera Drive in Glendale. Good evening, Chair Lee and members of the Planning Commission. I'm here representing the Glendale Homeowners Coordinating Council. Its president, Grant Michaels, was scheduled to be out of town on November 2nd, and he is. So here I am. Our presentation is going to focus on 4 items: errors in density calculations, insufficient provision of affordable units, miscalculation of incentives and waivers, and inadequate findings of fact. So the city approved the application based on a lot size of just over 7,500 square feet, with a density of 6 and less than 0.1% units, rounded up per state law to 7 units. And then with the density bonus, this brought the project to 11 units total. However, the developer is in fact entitled to less, based on the actual net lot size of less than 7,500 square feet, and a base density of just under 6 units, which gets rounded up to 6, and then with the density bonus, a total of 9 units. And the discrepancy is explained by the yellow highlighted triangle that's labeled C1. That's the corner of Jackson and California, and that belongs to the city. It was permanently deeded to them in 1972 by previous owners of the property. That square footage is not part of the project and cannot be included in the base density calculation. I should say that evidence for the PowerPoint comes from information provided by the city in a California Public Records Act request. So this slide is just a part of the easement deed recorded 50 years ago for that corner. And this is from Glendale's municipal code. And the key language here is for right-of-way dedications that are made. If an applicant is required to make a dedication for a current project, they're allowed to count that area toward density calculation. But they cannot count a dedication made 50 years ago by previous owners. That dedication was made in the past. And here you have this confirmed by Bill Ahern in an email to Cassandra Pruitt, where he says that the total area for purposes of calculating the density is under 7,500 square feet. And I should say that the number that they come up with ranges by about 2 or 3 square feet, but it's always under 7,500 and always less than 6 units. The red hatch marks indicate the area that Public Works ended up requiring to meet current ADA requirements. And that area can be included in the base density calculation because it's a dedication that is being made now, but not the previous area, C1. So in other words, the base density is 6 units, 9 units with the density bonus. And I know that this is hard to read, but this email indicates that the city attorney's office and planning staff were well aware of this requirement, and they were planning to let Mr. Simonian know that, that he had to recalculate the base density because of the change in the area. So how did the project get up to 11 units? And I'm going to go over a little bit of the information that we found in our Public Records Act request. So this is an email that Mr. Simonian sent to Eric Kraus on September 2nd, 2022. In it, he notes that, quote, itty-bitty little right-of-way results in the loss of 2 units. And he proposes a few ideas and strategies. Neither of them are clean or appealing. And he proposes a phone call that can be off the record. And I would just like to suggest as an aside that ideas that are neither clean or appealing should probably not be entertained by planning staff, but they were in this case. So this is an email follow-up 6 days later after a conversation. Mr. Simonian writes, we have the opportunity to clean up this old 1972 right-of-way easement. To clean all this up, we can replace the old 1972 easement with a new right-of-way dedication. So what this means is the idea is basically the developer was allowed to count land that he doesn't own as part of the new street dedication to get the amount of area he needs to qualify for a base density of 7 units and a project total of 11 units. And here's a final email from Mr. Simonian to Eric Kraus, noting that, that Cassandra Pruitt was unable to get feedback from Public Works, but it looks like they're going to need additional land for an ADA compliant dedication. And so, so our getting rid of the old easement and applying a new dedication idea should work. And I just want to say that this new dedication idea just corresponds to every stereotype that residents have about developers not playing by the rules. And I'd say that this is not limited to Glendale. Staff looking the other way are not caring enough to enforce them, and helping developers, in this case, get away with it. And I find that very troubling. So the city can require more affordable units for this project. On January 11th, 2022, Councilmember Brotman emailed Phil Lanzafame asking whether the city could get more affordable units. Dan knows that older housing is affordable housing, and the loss of 3 older units with 1 affordable replacement unit would be a net loss of affordability. Now, I'm sure Dan did not know this, but the rental agreements are in the record, and the rent for these units was $1,500 at the time the tenants were kicked out so that the building could be sold as vacant. Glendale's median income from 2016 to 2020 was $70,596. $1,500 is less than 30% of annual median income, and these really qualify economically as affordable units. And just as an aside, I don't know why the city uses LA County data in its calculations rather than Glendale data, because that is available. Phil Lanzafame replied to Dan on January 20th in an email that replacing more units was not possible under state law. And that's wrong, as the text that you see makes clear. For units that were subject to local rent or price control within the past 5 years, the city can require replacement of the 1 unit claimed to be occupied by a higher income person, the owner, at an affordable rent. So in 2019, Glendale passed its rental rights program, and this is a form of local price control. It gives tenants explicit rights when rents are increased beyond a certain level. And we just want to point out that the staff never considered the option of requiring replacement of more affordable units. And I apologize for the muddle in your presentation. I had to add all the figures. Despite the City Council's clear and often stated goal of increasing affordable housing in the city and Councilmember Brotman's specific request regarding this project. This is the language from Glendale's density bonus application. Reasonable documentation must be submitted, both for the request for incentives and the request for waivers. And the staff report did cite a recent case, Schreiber v. Los Angeles, in which the appeals court ruled that cities cannot require a pro forma from developers. However, the ruling explicitly allows reasonable documentation demonstrating, quote, identifiable and actual cost reductions. And Glendale's density bonus applications require it. The City Council directed staff in July 13, 2021, that they were interested in having such information, and we could find no such documentation for either incentives or waivers in the public record. So how does Glendale count incentives and waivers? We would say inaccurately. The applicant is allowed 2 incentives based on the provision of 1 affordable unit. So let's say that additional height and an additional story count as 1 incentive. I think it is impossible to consider incentives for separate requests for street front, street side, and interior setbacks as 1 incentive. At a minimum, they are 3. That is 3 separate variances from our building codes. They may be more than that because each one of these has a number of them embedded in it, but for sure, this is not 1 incentive. So the same problem exists with the waivers. The FAR is certainly 1 waiver. Each waiver, each variance from the minimum unit size is a separate waiver. And I don't have a lot invested in having large apartments. On the contrary. However, I do think that the city needs to be honest about how it calculates incentives and waivers. The city has development standards for a reason, and here Glendale just gives away excessive incentives and waivers to developers in turn for a very, very small number of affordable units, and in this case, a net loss of affordable units. So finally, there are no findings of fact for the waivers. As Ms. Pruitt mentioned, the burden is on the applicant to prove that without the waivers, they would be physically precluded from building the number of units allowed under the density bonus. Here, these are just a couple of emails, and waivers are not because applicants, quote, prefer not to redesign. And they shouldn't be discussed with the expectations that the findings will just be modified to accommodate them. So these are the draft findings of fact for the hearing. These were written by Mr. Simonian, as is Glendale policy. And notice that these emphasize improving the financial pro forma and the financial viability of the project. Increasing profitability for the developer is not justification for waivers. And I was kind of surprised to hear Ms. Pruitt in the presentation use this again as an excuse. They are not to increase profitability. And here is an email. This was written 2 weeks after the close of the public hearing on June 15th, 2022. And planning staff wrote to Mr. Simonian requesting additional information because they could not make the findings of fact based on what was in the record. And obviously this isn't appropriate, and I think it was probably a mistake. And the pages and pages and pages of redacted material after this suggest that legal and other people shut it down. But at the same time, staff is acknowledging here they lack the information to make the required findings of fact for the waivers. What do you do in that instance? You don't write to the applicant again. You reject the waivers and you reject the density bonus application. And these are what we get as the final findings of fact. And these are not findings that the construction of the project would be physically precluded without the waivers, even though that conclusion appears here without any evidence to support it. Instead, the finding is that the project will, quote unquote, optimize density. I don't even know what that means. And, quote, will improve and balance the unit mix and provide a range of housing types, none of which justifies the waivers. So in conclusion, I ask that you grant the appeal of this project. There is ample evidence to suggest that this should be done. The density bonus application should be denied. City processes need to be fixed. And finally, responsible staff, by which I mean leadership, not the case planner, need to be held accountable for what, as an ordinary resident, a well-informed but ordinary resident, feels like quite a corrupt process. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Urca. Do you have any questions for the appellant? Yes, go ahead, please.
I guess my questions are more so to staff, so.
Well, okay, so,
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of points that you brought up, so I'm hoping that applicant could address some of those things, and then maybe at later time, staff can address some of these, if you call it, the findings or accusations. So you don't have any questions for the appellant? Not at this point? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So next, we'd like to ask the applicant, Mr. Art Simonian, to come up. We're hoping that you can address some of these concerns. Yeah, but
Good evening, Chairman Lee, Planning Commissioner, City Attorney, and staff. I was actually hoping, and we were actually hoping that maybe staff could address some of these findings first and accusations first, and then, of course, we would follow up as necessary. I just believe some of these are legal matters, and it might be best for the city attorney and others to comment on first, if that would be my opinion.
yes, that is a good point. So then, yeah, we'll take that and ask staff to, I guess, respond to appellant first, then we'll ask you to
Thank you,
come.
Chairman Lee.
Go ahead, Ms. Pruitt. Were you aware of all this, the details from the appellant?
Yes. Now, do you have specific items that you want us to answer or clarify?
Well, it seems like she was kind of questioning all the numbers. I guess most importantly is the basis number with that 12 square foot, inclusion or exclusion type of thing. So anyways, you can go through that, and then maybe we can address some of the questions from the commissioners.
Okay. So in terms of the lot size issue, which determines the base density, there were further discussions that happened that weren't shown in the slides that were shared. But ultimately, the solution that was arrived at was for that the developer would vacate the existing dedication. And when he referred to cleaning up the dedication, that's what that means. It would be vacated so that it would no longer exist. And then the new dedication would be recorded, which is larger and more stringent than the existing dedication. So that's how the dedication would have been removed. And that would have been required to be done through the building permit process. The permit wouldn't be issued until that was done. So that's how that was proposed to be done. If the commission feels more comfortable, we could add that as a condition of approval, with the project.
I think that would be, prudent to do that, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
And members of the Planning Commission, if I could just add to Ms. Pruitt's, another thing we considered was that in the density bonus law, it does say this chapter shall be interpreted liberally in favor of producing the maximum number of total housing units. So That is a sentiment in the density bonus law. It was the intent of the density bonus law when it was adopted, that cities should make every effort to interpret it liberally to produce the maximum number of units, because there is a severe housing crisis in California. We need a lot of housing, whether it's affordable or not affordable. And so that, we were trying to follow the intent of that law, and came up with a solution that we felt was legal, and there was absolutely nothing nefarious that happened. It was just us trying to work with the developer, as we normally do, to come up with a solution for this particular project.
Thank you, Ms. Nukin, for that additional explanation. That does help us quite a bit. Thank you. Would you like to address the question?
Yes. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to the appellant for their presentation. I'd like staff to just walk us through how the incentives and waivers are counted, because the way I understand it, if it falls within the category of setbacks and there's multiple, it is one, and that's a law either within our city or from the state level, but I just wanted to clarify it on a public record.
Certainly, and that's an excellent question. So this topic, just before I go into how we do it, how we used to do it. So the way we've always done it is we've counted a setback as one incentive, whether it be interior, side, or street front. We count it as one because it's one development standard. However, there was a discussion that the appellant referred to as having been had by the City Council in July, and actually it continued on through July, and a motion was adopted by the City Council in October of 2021 that directed staff to go look at the way we do this particular incentive with setbacks, and directed us to going forward, well, not going forward, to come back with a code amendment or additional policy that would separate these setback incentives out. That was the only development standard that the council directed staff to come back with and separate out into 3 separate incentives. That has not been brought back to council yet to decide or vote on. Even had it, there is a provision in state law that says that a development applicant can be vested. And that is a recent law under the Housing Accountability Act that provides an applicant the ability to submit a preliminary application. And once that preliminary application is submitted and taken, there's no completeness review, it just gets submitted and it has to be taken in by a city. Once that is done, it vests the applicant in the ordinances, development policies, fees, everything that the city has at the time it was received. So the applicant, on page 1, I believe, of the staff report, there is a timeline of when all the various preliminary applications were submitted pursuant to Government Code 65941.1, and that defines what a preliminary application is. Just for information, the Housing Accountability Act is Government Code 65589.5, subsection O, subsection 1, talking about housing development projects shall only be subject to ordinances and policies adopted and in effect when a preliminary application is submitted. There are some exceptions that are not applicable here. We have gone through the analysis. So in other words, the applicant submitted their preliminary application well before the City Council adopted the motion that would direct staff to come back with separating the incentives, the setback incentives, into separate and distinct incentives. That is a very long way of saying that the applicant was considered under the current policy, which was to treat setback incentives as one development standard.
Thank you again, Ms. Nikki.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. That clarifies. I think it would also be helpful to get staff's feedback on the count of the affordable units. From my perspective, I understand the calculation of 14%, one affordable unit for the by right allowable units of 7, not counting the additional 4 affordable units. My question is more so on the replacement unit side. how it pertains to the 2 vacant units and how that was analyzed on your end.
Yes, so that is, there's actually a pretty complicated process, and there's various iterations of how you calculate replacement units. And it's Government Code 65915B is one scenario, and, I'm sorry, B1, little I is one scenario, and B little 2 is the second scenario. So this was analyzed under B2, and that is because all of the units, at the time the application was made, that's when you count it. So at the time the application was made, all of the units were vacant. So the government code is pretty clear that if all of the rental dwelling units, we're not talking about owner occupied. So it's important to remember there were 3 units on the site, 2 were rental dwelling units, and 1 was owner occupied. So it's pretty clear under the statute that that owner occupied unit does not count as a unit because the owner was living there and it was not being rented. So under this scenario, I'm going to try to summarize, but basically, it's unknown what the income level of these former tenants were. As you can understand, it would be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to go back in time, track down who those tenants were, and even more probably impossible to try to get them to voluntarily provide documents that would show or not show, to show what income level they were at. So obviously the legislature in enacting 65915 realized that this would be a very difficult burden to meet, if not impossible. So they provided a methodology for calculating replacement units when the income levels of the people that occupied the units in the last 5 years were not known. And this is the case if the housing development is delivered vacant, and at the time the application is made, it is vacant. That is, that is a scenario where you're not going to be able to find out what the income level of those tenants were. So the code says that there's a rebuttable presumption that low-income and very low-income renter households occupy these units in the same proportion of low-income and very low-income renter households to all renter households within the jurisdiction as determined by the most recently available data from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development's Comprehensive Housing Affordability Strategy database. That is all to say that these figures exist out there, and the city used these figures, and it is detailed on page, I believe, 5 of the staff report, if I'm not mistaken. The analysis is all there. So basically, it's 37%, and that was calculated by taking the total number of these 2 income categories to all renter households, coming up with that percentage, and then applying it to the 2 rental dwelling units, which is the only which are the dwelling units that we can count. We cannot count the owner-occupied unit. So 37% of 2 is 0.74, and we have to round that up to 1. So that's how we came up with that.
Okay,
Understood. Thank you. That's very helpful.
yeah, thank you.
I think I'm good for now. Yeah,
You're
thank you.
good, okay. How about,
I think questions were answered.
yes? Yeah, we wanted to make sure that we had all this clarification. So now I'd like to, do you have anything else to add from the staff? No, okay, so I'd like to bring Mr. Simonian back, applicant. Please state your name and address.
Art Simonian, 501 West Glen Oaks Boulevard, Glendale, number 556.
You have
Good
15
evening.
minutes, sir.
Okay, and a lot of what I was going to discuss has already been stated so eloquently by Ms. Pruitt and, of course, Ms. Nukian and the city attorney's team. And so at this point, I'm going to cut through some of this and maybe just kind of focus in on some of the more relative items. And then, of course, we'll have an opportunity for you to ask me questions as necessary. So again, good evening, Chairperson Lee, Planning Commissioners, City Attorney's Office, and staff. I'm Art Simonian, and I'm the developer for the project. And as depicted, the subject property is located at 246 North Jackson at the southeast corner of Jackson and California. And it's important to note because the project site is located a short walk from the Ralph's Shopping Center, from the Whole Foods Shopping Center, from the Glendale Civic Center, and it's in very close proximity to the transit routes and what is coming around the corner with the BRT major transit stop that's going to connect the North Hollywood Red Line to Pasadena. And I think these are some important things to kind of bring up that staff has already indicated. And so if we go to the next slide, there's a mix of uses surrounding the project consisting of churches, 4-story multifamily building, commercial office buildings, retail uses, and of course the 4-story Glendale Unified School District located just south of us. And so with the next slide, the project is located, if we would actually just skip ahead, I would say let's go to number 4. The project is located 0.4 miles to the intersection of Glendale and Broadway. This intersection will serve as the future BRT station site, which will connect, as I said, the North Hollywood Red Line to Pasadena. And it will also connect our city of Glendale to LA County's entire metro system. I mean, this is phenomenal. Like this is coming to our city. And therefore, our very close proximity to this BRT station will connect the project site to the overall LA County. And that's important to note because this project has been approved, it has been funded, and it is going to be built. It's coming. And this project is going to benefit from it because its residents will be able to utilize it. And so moving on to slide 11, and I'm going to cut ahead from 4 to 11. As for the appeal, it is very loosely written. The appellant has not provided enough details and has provided very little facts in the appeal. Appellant has responded with simple yes and no responses to very complicated questions. As the development team prepares its findings for a given project or as city staff presents a staff report, great effort is put forth to make sure all the facts are stated and all the findings are supported with appropriate backup material. However, this is not the case with this appeal. It has been filed for this project. This appeal lacks merit and it lacks substance, I think is the best way to put it. This is a modest 11-unit project that we're proposing. This will benefit one very low-income family. The project will also provide much-needed workforce housing for 10 additional families. The requested concessions or waivers are required in order for this project to be built. Without the requested concessions and waiver, this project cannot be built with the same density, with the same square footage, and with the necessary unit mix. If we would go to slide number 14. As for the requested waivers, 7 of the requested waivers are asking for very slight deviations from the Glendale Unified Code for minimum unit sizes. We're asking for 574 square foot units to be allowed instead of the 600. That is a 26 square foot deviation. It's the size of a closet. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. However, the slight deviation creates 2-bedroom units versus 1-bedroom units. It creates 1-bedroom units versus studios. Provides efficient and necessary workforce housing, and not to dwell on the 26 square feet is kind of what we're here to talk about, right? The big picture. We're in a housing crisis. We need to provide housing. And the state has indicated that we should use development standards loosely to provide housing, good housing, that's located close to transportation, and that's what we're doing. That's been our intent, and we've worked wholeheartedly with staff to accommodate these goals. If we go to slide number 16, this is the second floor plan. With the major discussions we had with staff, the idea was to push the mass towards California Avenue and away from the existing building to the south. And so, yes, we are asking for concessions on setback. But as you could see, the building is just pushing itself north. We're still providing the 5-foot minimum setback on the south side. And yes, on the north side, along California, which is a street, there's no neighbor to the north of us. Instead of a minimum 5 feet, it's a little less. But it's providing for those crucial units that are necessary to bring this project to fruition. In regards to some of the deeds and other nuances that were brought up, this project was going through 2 years of the system with the city, and it was in the middle of COVID. Everything was happening remotely, everything was happening via emails, and the ability to just sit down and problem solve took a great amount of coordination and communication. But at the end of the day, the 1972 was a deed, was an easement deed. It's not a dedication, as the appellant brought up, it's an easement deed. And what we're doing is getting rid of a non-conforming easement deed, and we're adding a now conforming dedication deed, which gives up more land, of my land, to the city for a required 12-foot handicap ramp. And so these dedications do not go towards the counting of your density bonus calculation. I'm not quite sure why the appellant is going through this amount of effort for such a centrally located project. This project will be good for Glendale, and it'll be a good example for future density bonus projects for our city. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
If we do have any, we'll ask you to come back up. But
Planning
we can call back.
Chair Lee, if I could, sorry, I forgot to address something that the appellant brought up, and I just was reminded during the developer's presentation, the applicant's presentation, was that the appellant brought up the fact that the waiver findings were not made. It's true that the city attorney's office did look at this, as we're want to do, to make sure it conforms with the statute. And we reviewed this, and I just want to remind the commission that the government code says that a waiver, it says a city or county shall not apply any development standard that will have the effect of physically precluding the construction of a development meeting the criteria of subdivision B at the densities or with the concessions or incentives permitted by the section. So what this means is, as long as it provides affordable housing, that's what it means when it says the development meets the criteria of subdivision B. That development, meaning at those densities, with that unit mix, and with any additional gym, spa, whatever amenities they want to offer, that's what you analyze. You don't analyze the development without those things. So we analyze the development as presented because the law requires us to. The law requires us to analyze the developer's project, and the developer's project had that particular unit mix. So with that particular unit mix, there was plenty of evidence that the developer could not provide that unit mix at those that 600 square foot minimum unit size. And so that's why we were able to make the finding that had he not gotten that waiver, he could not have built those units. I just wanted to clarify that. I also wanted to address one more point, and I'll make it very quick. With respect to the replacement units and the fact that there were this notion that these 3 units were affordable. Well, clearly one of them, as we previously mentioned, was owner occupied, and we didn't 100% verify that the owner was not low income, but it's pretty clear the owner owned multiple properties. But regardless, it's not a rental dwelling unit, so it doesn't count. I want to address this notion that affordable means it's based on rent. It's not. Under the state law, affordability is determined by the income of the tenant, not by the rent charged. This project will provide one affordable unit, which will be deed restricted and will be a 55-year covenant. There is nothing to guarantee if these units remained on the market that they wouldn't go up year after year and would not be affordable. In addition, as Ms. Pruitt pointed out, there was the rental units were both 1 bedroom, and this 1 replacement unit will be 2 bedrooms. And housing staff, I believe, did look at the fact that it is going to be two-bedroom, and determined that this more than met the intent of the law to replace the one-bedroom. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for further explanation. I think we can bring back appellant for rebuttal, or do you have any other
Actually, I
comment?
want to point out that we
Yeah.
have a number of phone calls.
Oh,
and
you
I don't
do?
know if there are any other speakers on this, but I
So
wanted
do
to
we
see.
hear them before she comes up, or?
Yes.
Okay, yes, please. Then go ahead and we'll go to the public.
Mr. Zarazian, you're on live with the Planning Commission. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for hearing me out this evening. I'm a lifelong LA resident. I grew up in the Hollywood area. I'm in my 40s, and I just wanted to say it's amazing the transformation I've seen with Glendale as a real destination for people from everywhere and with desire to live there. I own a West LA-based, or I'm co-owner of a West LA-based media company, and hiring is obviously an important thing. And I've had 3 experiences where Glendale has come up. I've had an experience with employees who are trying to move from the west side of town to the east side of town, and a lot of them mention Glendale, and they just can't get it. They just can't get it done because there's not enough affordable housing. So it pushes them further east, and that makes the commute even worse, and it's created a problem. I've also had one potential employee who was a great match for the company and vice versa, and they lived in North Pasadena, and their intent was to move to Glendale to cut down the commute, but they couldn't find affordable housing, so that died on both ends. Finally, as we all know, COVID has really affected everyone in the way we live and act, and we have a current employee who we really like a lot, and he lives in North Pasadena. And we're trying to get everybody back to the office 2 days a week. And because of COVID, he's become accustomed to working at home. So it's become an issue, and we were trying to find a compromise where he would move somewhere between Glendale and Silver Lake to try and get closer to our West LA office to make it in a couple of times a week. And he's having an issue finding housing too. So I'm here to support the project at 246 North Jackson because I've had these experiences, and because Glendale has become a great place to live and desirable by young professionals. And we'd love to be able to have people living and residing in Glendale and working at the company in West LA. So
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Okay, next speaker.
Good evening, Mr. Vladian. You're live on with the Planning Commission. You have 3 minutes. Mr. Vladian?
Yes, hi, this is Artak Dovlatian.
Yes, you're on live with the Planning Commission. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I am in support of the project located at 246 North Jackson. I'd like to commend the developer for a well-designed project and being able to make the project work, and in addition, provide an affordable housing component to this project. I drive by the site multiple times for many years. I've always thought this site is underutilized and warrants for more units. Going through the appeal, looking at the project, reading the staff report, I feel the appeal lacks grounds and merit, and the staff noted and confirmed this to be true as well. I think in general we should promote and encourage development of multifamily housing units, both affordable and market rate housing. This project is an example of a responsible development and should be approved. Again, I'm in support of this project.
Thank you.
That's it.
Next speaker, please.
Next speaker, Ms. Hoskins, you're on live with the Planning Commission. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I am a production supervisor in the entertainment industry, and I strongly support the development of this project. Throughout my career, I have worked in major movie studios in the LA area, many of which are in close proximity to Glendale. Over and over, I have observed my coworkers wanting to live close to the studios and in the city of Glendale, but cannot find a solid inventory of rental options, especially in the downtown area. Projects like this will help combat the issue of lack of affordable housing for employees within the entertainment industry. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have more speakers?
We do.
Okay.
Next, Ms. Donna Lorera, you are on live with the Planning Commission. You have 3 minutes. Donna, are you there? Let's move on to the next one. Ms. Baragian, you're on live with the Planning Commission. You have 3 minutes. Hello? Okay. Next, we will move on to Ms. Vartazian. You're on live with the Planning Commission. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Serena Jeanette Bardazarian. I own rental property in the city of Glendale, and I support the development of 246 North Jackson. I was able to watch the initial hearing for 246 North Jackson and was excited for the prospect of a well-designed multi-unit rental being developed in an area of Glendale that very much needs more rental housing. And to my dismay, I recently learned about the appeal. And I think that the Jackson project is providing much needed housing in downtown Glendale. The project is well thought out, and the requested concessions and waivers are beautifully integrated into the design. 246 North Jackson stands as an example of exactly the type of project that the city should unequivocally support. Frivolous appeals on well thought out projects such as 246 North Jackson take away precious time, money, and resources from the city of Glendale and impede on the ability of the city to combat the housing deficit that we see there. And so that being said, I urge the Planning Commission to approve this project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Mr. Sarkisian, you're on live with the Planning Commission. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, hello, thank you. Good evening. My name is Paul Sarkisian. I really support this project as well. I've been a real estate broker for many years now, and my office is very nearby. I pass through the project very often, pretty much daily, multiple times. I think it is an absolute beautiful location for multi-units development. There's a high demand for, rental units in the area, the whole city of Glendale. I can't even have enough units available. I've been renting my units within a few days period. There's so many applications coming in. It's really unbelievable. Never seen this before in my entire career. I really support the project. I hope the planning commissioners will approve this. I think it's absolutely beautiful. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next, and I think last, Ms. Tina Hart, you're on live with the Planning Commission. Please go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Tina Hart. I'm a longtime Glendale resident. I'm also a leasing agent in the area. I have family that lives in the area right across the street, and I'm actually there quite often. And I actually park right there on California, and I'm calling to support this project. It's a beautiful addition to the community. I'm frequently in the neighborhood, and I actually seen what the current situation is there right now. It's this empty lot, and there's a three-unit, I believe, building on there. It's really unlivable. And this is such a beautiful project that is going to take place there. And, I know I have family that my grandmother used to live down the street, and actually, I think over 25 years ago, this property has been sitting there like that. So it's going to be a beautiful addition, and would really support the approval of this project. I'm a little confused on hearing the case that I think it was Ms. Catherine Yerka, very confused about her presentation. I didn't really hear any real kind of solutions. It was just appealing to appeal. I mean, it looks like there was a lot of hard work that went into this project, but there weren't really any solutions of adding new buildings, new units to Glendale area. No solutions, just a lot of complaints, and looks like, you know, they're kind of attacking the city staff, which looks like they've worked, you know, amazingly hard on this. So I really hope you support this project and approve it and deny this appeal. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. How about those two callers? You want to go back or? Yeah. Yeah, just want, give them a chance one more time, please.
Good evening, Donna. You're on live with the Planning Commission. You have 3 minutes.
Okay.
Donna? And Ms. Faragian?
Good evening.
Good evening. You have 3 minutes. You're on live with the Planning Commission.
Fantastic. Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Cherise Zerigian. I am a rental property owner in the city of Glendale. So time and time again, we are here again dealing with wasteful appeals. The current existing building at Jackson, 246 North Jackson, is dilapidated and frankly an eyesore in the neighborhood. This is a well-designed project. It's going to add to the beautification of the neighborhood. It's going to be absolutely additive. It is not intrusive from a height perspective. It offers more parking than required by code. Frankly, 246 North Jackson is the ideal rental property housing for downtown Glendale. The reality of our situation now is that Glendale is thriving, which is fantastic. It has gone through a massive transformation in the last 15 years. It has evolved into a metropolitan center for the east side of Los Angeles. We need housing to accommodate the beautiful evolution of our city and to support the growth of our city economically and financially. Yet here we are again, wasting time and resources of the city on wasteful anti-development appeals, on appropriate and frankly extremely additive projects like 246 North Jackson. I urge the Planning Commission to approve 246 North Jackson project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So that ends the speakers. Okay, so then we'll move on to asking Ms. Yurka to come back. You have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Great. Thank you very much. So my solution is a 9-unit project. That is the solution. It is what the developer is entitled to as a density bonus project. I was astonished to hear someone say that my appeal lacked substance. It is true that it was bare bones coming before you, but I think that it was very detailed and largely spot on. So in our Public Records Request Act, our request, we got 7,000 pages of documents, and I went through every one to prepare this appeal. There are pages and pages and pages of documents on the easement and on it can't be included in the calculation once they figure out that it was deeded in 1972 by a previous owner 50 years ago. There is not one mention of the decision to allow the developer to somehow give back that easement, to give back an easement that he doesn't own, and then provide a brand new one, including that land. How do you give back something that's not yours? In all the material I covered, the staff mentioned that he has not been paying property taxes on it, so it's not clear to me how that works. The city attorney seems interested in policy when it favors the developer. So for example, the way that incentives are calculated, it's the stupid way that Glendale has been doing it all along. And people didn't know about it because these were not going to a public hearing. They were decided by the director of community development without public notice. So the density bonuses had been approved, and then suddenly the public was getting to see what the director had wrought. But the city policy is that the developer can't count the previous easement. Why is that policy like somehow something that we can just throw out the window? The applicant himself said that it was not a clean solution. I ask you not to do something dirty. People wondered why we would be involved in a density bonus project so far from Montrose and where I live. It's because density bonus projects go up all over Glendale. There have been a number of them proposed in Montrose. They've been handled in this previously secretive fashion, and people are furious at the way that incentives and waivers are being given out like candy to developers. As you saw, the density bonus application requires that applicants provide reasonable documentation to prove their case. And there is no documentation. There is nothing. We heard the city attorney said that it's more than proven. Then why did the staff member 2 weeks after the public hearing write to the developer saying, we cannot make the findings of fact for the waiver? You don't get new information at that point. They could not make those findings. And it doesn't matter if they're itsy bitsy teeny weeny unit adjustments. Those are 8 waivers that are being requested. They're being misrepresented as 2, and that is not city policy. That is not the setbacks thing. That, staff decided to do that a long time ago. This is a new plot that is just hatched for this project. I think I would like, there's no documents that suggest owner occupancy in the public record. There is a document suggesting there was an illegal unit. I'd be curious to know if that was where the owner was living. And why would an owner who owns property throughout the city of Glendale be living in a kind of rundown 570 square foot 1-bedroom apartment? And ordinarily, I would not be this skeptical, but that is what this process has created in me. I think that what is before you is more than ample for you to uphold or grant the appeal. This project will not go away, as the applicant said, but it will be an appropriate project under what the applicant is allowed, according to Glendale policy, without shenanigans on the part of senior planning staff and the city attorney, and with true documentation as required under the density bonus that will make a case for why those waivers are necessary to build the project, because as you've heard, they were not provided in the information that you got. I'm sorry I'm so heated, but this just seems so obvious to me that the appeal should be granted. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Yeah, thank you. This is a healthy public hearing and planning commission hearing of bringing up cases where you present your case, and then we have an opportunity to weigh them in. Do you have from city attorney's office or from staff like to rebuttal what just Ms. Yuka just brought up?
If the Planning Commission members have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but I don't have anything to say.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. So then we will close the public hearing and go into deliberation. So who would like to go first? Commissioner Shabazian.
I can go first.
Thank you.
This was a great presentation. It was great to hear from all the sides. So I'll say what's on my heart and what I feel. So we have a housing shortage in the state, and we can't ignore it. And with the shortage of housing and shortage of land, the only way we can address that is to do infill developments. And usually a higher density in Glendale means downtown Glendale. Looking at the photos and kind of reviewing staff report, the land seems to be perfect for a project. This, to me, after hearing what has been presented, is following state laws and also city ordinances. It seems like there are some changes that might be coming down the pipes with city council, but it doesn't apply to this project, as this project sounds to be grandfathering in what was previously in place. To me, this is a well-designed project. I'm all for being close to public transit stops, being a transit-oriented development. makes me happy because that helps to reduce vehicle mile traveled throughout the city. That brings down pollution. There's so many positives that can happen. Projects like this, I think, are great for downtowns and city downtown core areas. I just want to thank the staff, both planning staff and legal team, for doing all the research. I know it's a lot. I know how it is. And appreciate all the information you gave to us. Commissioner Trakchi, on all the questions you had, they really shed a light on the some questions I had. With that, I would vote yes on this project. And I think this is a well-designed project. It's a good project we have for the city and similar projects down the pipeline. We shouldn't just look at single family. We should think about how the city is growing and how we should focus on that specifically in downtown Glendale. So that's my say.
Thank you, Commissioner Sebastian. Commissioner Minassian.
A very short statement. As you guys know, I'm a real estate broker, and I get phone calls pretty much on daily basis, people asking for places to live, rent, and all that stuff. Especially there's a daily high school right like in the neighborhood and where the Glendale Unified School District is. And there's a lot of hardworking people that they're really suffering, and this project will definitely help them, especially with 2 units that they're dedicated for a low income and very low income. So I think this is a marvelous, perfect project for the neighborhood, and I'll second your motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Minassian. Commissioner Fuentes.
Well, thank you again to the appellant, the applicant, staff, and very good responses to a lot of our questions that cleared up a lot of doubts in our mind. It's a small project, modest. I'm going to be more concerned if it was like 50 units or 100 units we're talking here. It's the project, I think, will be a good addition to the neighborhood, and it's close to all the transit and transportation area. It's in good location. Comparing it with what's existing in there, this is definitely a much, much better and an improvement, that will be a good addition to the neighborhood and to the community. The requested incentives and concessions and waivers are very minimal, 24 square feet, 32 square feet. We're not talking about hundreds of square feet for 11 units. And I also will be supporting the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Instruction.
I'll keep mine very brief. I just want to thank once again the applicant and the appellant for their time today, as well as staff and our legal team. I wholeheartedly agree with the comments from the rest of the commissioners. I would say that within downtown Glendale, this type of project, infill development in our busiest corridor, is the exact type of project that these density bonuses and waivers were made for. Now, with that being said, that doesn't mean they should be abused or stretched out of the realm of what's, a feasible ask. And in this case, like Commissioner Fuentes just mentioned, I find the requested waivers to be pretty modest and reasonable, and I'll also support the project.
Thank you. Initially I had some questions, some, areas where, regarding the incentives and the waivers, but staff, the city attorney's office did a marvelous job of, clarifying those items. So thank you very much. And our job is to really, some of these areas are kind of gray, and it is really our job to really look at the intent of what we're trying to do with the city, and our commissioners have really beautifully stated that, and I agree with my fellow commissioners. So I think we already had a motion and a support as we're delivering our opinions here. So go ahead and can you read the motion into the
did you want, Ms. Oz, do
Yeah.
you want me to read it, or?
If you're okay with the motion as drafted, I think a motion and a second and a roll call is just fine.
Okay.
One question, I believe there was I'm sorry, let me turn this on. I believe there was one item that we added to the motion, and I lost my motion, so let me find it while you.
So there was the suggestion from Ms. Pruitt to add into this approval the application for the new dedication? Is that,
I think it was a covenant or something.
I can't remember exactly, but it was a
It was
request.
to add a condition of approval that they would process the vacation of the dedication prior to issuance of a building permit.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Thank you. And does the legal team need to add that, or is that something we can vote on and it can be added later?
If we can agree to the substance of it, we can add the technical language in the formal motion, in the written motion.
Sounds good. So the motion passes, Commissioner, seconded by myself and seconded, who seconded?
Commissioner Mendoza.
Seconded by Commissioner Manassian, that upon review and consideration of all materials and exhibits of current record relative to density bonus review case number PDBP 2120753 for the project site located at 246 North Jackson Street, and after having conducted a public hearing on the appeal of said matter, the Planning Commission hereby sustains the planning hearing officer's decision granting with the conditions that are set, plus that extra item that was just added, and they're all listed here.
Thank you, Commissioner Sebastian. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Tarachian?
Yes.
Commissioner Fuentes?
Yes.
Commissioner Manassian?
Yes.
Commissioner Shabazian?
Yes.
Chairperson Lee?
Aye. Thank you. And next, moving on to the next item, we have Community Development Department updates.
Yes, Commission, no updates per se. Like I mentioned, we will have pretty full calendars for the rest of the year. I think we have 2 meetings left, and so we look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not gonna be here.
Okay.
So I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Actually, Chairperson, I was going to entertain something before adjournment.
Sure.
And this goes back to your comment earlier today when we started the meeting, and I wanted to see if we can actually close down the meeting for the victims of
Thank you very much. Thank you.
casualties in
Yeah.
Seoul, Korea, South Korea.
So thank you for those, the young victims. Maybe we can have a moment of silence, and then we'll adjourn. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So very nice. Thank you very much. All right. All right. Good night. Thank you, Cassandra, for all your help. Thank you.